All right, hey, high performers, it's Brendan, and this is week number 5 of your High Performance Academy training. Congratulations, week number 5, come on now. You know how few people in the world will dedicate 5 weeks of their life to ongoing personal development? So few. So I want to congratulate you for being here. I want to honor you again for just that effort, that journey of just going through, just watching the videos. Maybe sometimes you have a breakthrough, maybe sometimes you don't, but it's just in the constant immersion in personal development that we start finding our rhythm, that we start finding our clarity, that we start discovering new energies, that we get good perspective about life. And sometimes it completely changes our lives, and other times it just makes us feel good. And other times, it shifts the way we relate with people. And in this session, you're going to discover exactly all of that combined together. I think you're going to really love that. Because if there's one area where people struggle so much, it's in people skills, what we'll call persuasion for this session. You know, I really relate persuasion and people skills as the exact same thing. Because we're always trying to persuade somebody of something, whether we're trying to persuade them of how we feel or how we think, or how they should feel, or how they should think, or what we believe is truth or not truth, what's important, not important. Every time you open your mouth, you're communicating something. Every time you move, gesture, communicate non-verbally, they're absorbing something and they're being persuaded to feel one way or another about you. And I really believe that as we become more conscious about our own thoughts, our own feelings, our own psychology, as we talked about in the first sessions, you know, I feel like ultimately at some point we become more conscious about how we behave to others because we have a higher degree of intention for them, a higher degree of consciousness about our relationships and what we want those to be in our lives. But you and I both know sometimes it's easy to get on autopilot. Your relationships become, you know, blasé or blah. Your relationships kind of just go through the motions, you know. Hey, honey, how are you? Okay, what time are the kids coming home? Who's picking up who? Who's doing what? Okay, and all of a sudden, 1 week goes by, 2 weeks, 5 years, 10 years, and you wake up one day and you're like, where did that energy go that used to be in our relationship? Or you go in the office day after day, year after year, and suddenly you're kind of going through the motions and you're like, where's the energy in this work, in these relationships that I have at work? How come we used to be so excited about our dreams, our projects, our goals, and now as the company got bigger and bigger and bigger, we all just kind of like, oh, another damn meeting? You know? Sometimes it's really easy to lose that vibrancy and that pop in our relationships when we're not thinking about the fact that we really are influencing people at all times, that we really can direct how we feel, how other people feel, and that we can ultimately shape relationships that make our lives extraordinary. If I would say the one intention I hope we all have is that when we relate with other people, we want to make our relationships with them extraordinary. And some people never made that a distinction and a commitment in their life. So they kind of just go through the motions in a lot of relationships, and they never have that verve and that pop because they never said, you know what, I'm going to be persuasive in my relationship in order to make it an extraordinary relationship. And I'll be talking to you at multiple levels throughout these sessions in this week's training, from your personal relationships and persuading there, to managing conflict in relationships, whether they're personal or professional, to ultimately relationships with consumers or people who you want to sell ideas, products, your beliefs to, people who you really want to communicate outside your immediate circle. So this is a wide-ranging discussion here in this week, and I hope you just get a few tools, a few frameworks, a few new ideas that will help you improve one of the greatest and most important aspects of our lives, our relationships, our interactions with other people, because you deserve to have an extraordinary quality of relationship with other people, but you need to want it. You need to have a desire there that says, you know what, I want to boost all of my relationships. I want to boost my influence in the world. I want to boost how much people feel like I'm a role model, or how much people are being impacted by my life, my ideas, my products, my programs. Without that extra boost, that intention, that desire, and the belief that you can do it, we're dead in the water. And you already know that from that first session when we were talking about the life arenas. Everything in our life has been commanded by our desire and the command we feel in that area. And in this area, a lot of people, they never set an intention, but worse, sometimes they feel like it's not under their control. Now, we can't control other people, but we can highly influence them should we decide to, especially over a period of time. Maybe not right away can you get your spouse to see your way of thinking or feeling, or you can't get them to do exactly what you want. But over a period of time, the quality of your relationship, that is directly influenced by your continual feeding of the good, positive energy of that relationship, and by your intentions and everything that we're going to talk about in this session here. So just a couple reminders. Raise your ambition, okay? Raise that ambition. It's time to say, you know what? I'm going to become more influential in my relationships. I remember when I did that. I had a string of really bad, negative relationships in high school and college where I was, and I'm talking about intimate relationships, people I dated, the relationships, they just weren't good, and they had bad energy. And one day I said, you know what? I don't want that of my life. I want to be surrounded by people who are positive, and so I'm going to change how I approach them. I want to be surrounded by people who have as much heart and care and soul as I do, so I had to learn to amplify those in my own life, because remember, you got to be the change you want to see in the world. So let's take that positivity, that intention, that raising of your ambitions right now, because I know what can happen. Maybe you go through a couple bad relationships, bad teams, bad situations where people don't buy your stuff or believe in you. You go through a lot of doubt or rejection or judgment over a period of time, and you build up a wall, keep people out. And as soon as you build up that wall, you stop having that commitment to really break through it and reach out and grab people and connect with them. And that's what the challenge is. It can be very easy for you watching this, and I don't know where you're at, but I've dealt with this Fortune 50 CEO levels who are like, well, there's just a belief somewhere in their mind that they cannot persuade their people to go to another level. They believe somewhere that, this will turn out the same as last time, so let's just stay with the initiatives. Let's not do anything too innovative or crazy here. And it's difficult in our relationships too. Maybe you've been through a divorce, a couple bad relationships in a row, or your spouse right now is not giving you what you think you desire from them or what you truly need from them. And so you get jaded and you get bitter, or you just get resigned. You think, she's always going to be like that. He's never going to change. And when you get in that always and never generalizations about the relationships in your life, I don't care if it's at work or at home, that's when you become stagnant. That's when you become sometimes a victim, and that's when you sometimes take your foot off the gas and you say, I can't do anything here. I share all of that because you can do something there. No matter where your relationships are, no matter where they've been, you can have extraordinary relationships again. It might not be overnight. It might not be in one flip chart that we solve all this, but you can get there. You can continue. You have to believe that. By your continual influence in your relationships, you can raise the quality. Over a period of time, you can do it. If you don't believe that, stop now, because I can give you all the tools, all the strategies, all the tips, all the techniques. I'm going to tell you exactly how to deal with conflict in these sessions. I'm going to tell you how to sell stuff in these sessions. I'm going to tell you how to behave in these sessions. And all of that is thrown out the window if you believe you have no command over your relationships. If you have given up, flat out stopped, then it's going to be hard for me to do anything. I could cajole you, tease you, give you all the performance planners in the world, but if you don't believe that you can make that difference anymore, then I have to tell you something as your coach, as someone who cares about you, someone who's given 5 weeks here. Don't stop your transformation now by believing that you can't shift and significantly shape and, importantly, re-energize all of your relationships with higher degrees of influence. You got to believe, and this is the time to believe it. If you can take your relationship with your spouse to a whole other level, your partner to a whole other level, your team to a whole other level, your customers, the world to a whole other level. I didn't believe that for a while, so I kind of played this game. It just kind of went like this. Once I changed that, I wanted to make more influence. I wanted to improve the quality of all my relationships, including my customers. It went boom. My following in the world went from, a couple tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands, now to tens of millions. That would have never happened if I didn't set that intention for my relationships to be of superb quality in all aspects of my life. And then I got to work trying to make it happen. So I hope that's a good frame for everything that we're going to be talking about in persuasion and in your people skills development. So let's get right back to some basics, some reminders of things we've already covered in this program of High Performance Academy about you, and I want to remind you that it applies to other people as well. So some basic reminders. First and foremost, remember that intention defines all your relationships. That's why I just gave you that little speech. You've got to have an intention to create extraordinary relationships again. From everyone you deal with, you have to have that intention. Now, we talked about you setting intention triggers in the foundational training of this course. So if you didn't watch that, you go back to Foundation and you can click on the video that says about influence, how to increase your influence, and watch that again. You got to have influence or intention triggers in your relationships. Remember, you might set up intention triggers for different members of your family. What's an intention trigger? It means you see someone's eyes, you say something to in your mind when you see their face that reminds you how to be, right? You might see your spouse, and as soon as you see her when you come home from work, you remind yourself of these 3 words, and it reminds you how to be with her. So all it's doing is helping you become more conscious in those relationships. And your intention for the relationships, I have to share with you, in this modern world, a lot of the intention in relationships has become get. It's become very self-absorbed. It's become very narcissistic. The intention is it's almost transactional. I'll only give you something if you give me something. I'll only love you if you love me. I'll only be positive if you're positive. Or take care of me, 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 take care of me. And we've gotten this place where the intention has been to take from relationships versus give. And I always say, it's very biblical, ask and you shall receive. But we got to go beyond that too in our relationships and realize it's give and you shall receive. It's, that old saw in personal development that it's not, what percentage do you need to give in relationships? And the old answer is, it's not 50-50. It's 100%, 100%. The intention must return to you looking to your relationships and in all of your interactions with people and ask, what can I bring to this? What energy would I love for this relationship, this community to have? And now get to work to delivering it. It's got to come back to that. Your intention must rise for all of your relationships to go into what we would call high performance, to go to that next level. And I know you know this. Maybe you don't need this talk, but sometimes common sense is not common practice. You finished it. And so we got to get there. We got to get there. Your intention must be positive, must be extraordinary, must be caring, must be loving, must be giving for your relationships now to improve to the next level. And I know I'm preaching to some of the choir, as I always am. Some of you already have extraordinary qualities of relationships. And those, too, can go to another level if you have that intention. Okay? You must have that intention. What else defines all relationships? Positivity. It defines everything. The amount of positivity in a relationship is everything. And you feel it. If you've ever been in a relationship with someone who is not positive, who is negative, that relationship was defined by that singular thing. It really was. It was just defined by the energy within which the context of that relationship was going. So ask yourself, how positive have you been with your kids? What do you think about it? Have you been just the disciplinarian? Or have you also praised them and been the positive factor in their lives? Think about your team. Is it always just push, 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 demand, demand, demand? Or do you stop to cheer everybody on and create a positive, fun, joking, relaxed environment? Think about that relationship with your customers. What's it really defined by? Are you the marketer that is always pushing problems? Problem, 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 problem. I have the solution. Problem, problem, problem. But you're really just framing yourself with problems all the time? Or are you framing the aspect of your product or your service as something that can be extraordinarily positive in multiple areas of their life? These questions, I hope, reveal to you and get you thinking, how have I been really interacting? Because intention is one thing, but positivity, it is felt, it is seen, it is palpable. You can feel it, taste it, see it, watch it move across a room. And so I'm challenging you now to bring more positivity to every single thing you do. People say, well, that's Pollyannish, Brendan. I say, Pollyanna seem happy to me. What's wrong with that? I mean, at some point you have to say, what's the energy of my life and interactions? And if I'm going to get you to another level in your relationships, in your sales, in your brand, in your team, it must come from these two places. It must come from that desire to improve them, and it must come from the energy that you bring to them. If you do that, that's going to be what ultimately defines the quality of that relationship, right? How much you bring to it. Because, it's difficult to shape what other people bring to it unless you do these two things. You must be the change that you seek. It begins here. Second reminder is that perception drives all results in the relationships. I want you to remember, if you can, this, what we call the perception ladder in the psychology week of our training, where you learn how your mind works. Remember, there's a video, how your mind works. And the way that it works is you're absorbing and taking in information. You're interpreting it as true, false, good, bad, meaningful, not meaningful, something to give attention to, something to not. Then from that, you set an intention. What do I want? What do I desire of this? What do I think of this? What next needs to happen next? You decide to take some initiative or not. You approach or avoid. You go for it, you don't. You start the conversation or run from it. And then from all of that, that is shaping who you are. Now, why would I remind you of all this? Excuse me. I do that because if you're going to have extraordinary persuasion, you need to not only be aware of this in your interactions with other people, you need to start teaching yourself to observe this in other people. Meaning, I'm always looking for how other people's minds are working. What do they think? How are they interpreting this? What actions are they taking? Why did they do that? If they're doing something, their initiative, I never get mad at anybody, ever. Because most of the time that they take some kind of initiative or action, if I don't like it, my first question is to work the ladder backwards. They just did this weird action. I don't like it. I wonder what their intention was here. I wonder what information came in and how they interpreted it and set that intention. I wonder, based on that initiative, what they think of themselves. I wonder all these things, especially before I go to persuade somebody. I mean, think about, I got to stand in front of thousands and thousands of people all year long, and even now in this video, in front of millions and millions of people throughout our videos and our courses, every single year, I'm always thinking about, okay, if I say this, how might I interpret that? What intention can we raise? What would we ask them to do? How would we ask them to think about themselves and us? So my persuasion is always formed around the idea that people's minds work in a specific way. And once I learn that ladder of perception, what it does is it gives you the greatest thing you could ever have in relationships and persuasion, which is this: perspective. You gotta get out of your own stuff if you're gonna have extraordinary relationships. You've heard it, you gotta walk in other people's shoes. Have you ever heard that? Well, I'm like, climb in their shoes. Climb their ladder of perception. Think about it. If you're having a fight with someone right now, if you're in conflict with someone right now, before you go and charge them, I'm mad at you because, stop. Take a moment to breathe and think through, how might they be perceiving this? Why did they do what they do? How can I walk it backwards and just start thinking through? Maybe they got some information you didn't have. Maybe they saw the situation, interpreted it in a way that you didn't. Maybe their intention wasn't the same as yours. In that moment, their intention was need-based versus giving-based, and it just changed everything. All of that we covered in your week of training on psychology, and I want to remind you, this is going to be vital for any effort. You can't sell any idea, ask for anyone to change, approach anyone you're in conflict with without thinking through their perception of what happened. Because if you didn't, trust me, their perception, all the results you're experiencing in your relationships are coming from your perceptions. Once you take these two into account, intention and positivity, the next thing is perception. How are you perceiving it? How are they perceiving it? So I want you to become a ninja, a master, a genius, a very highly conscious human, mindful person who says, how might they be perceiving this? I want you to do that when you think about your politics, when you think about your business, when you think about your loving relationships. Every single time. How are they perceiving this? This must become a dominant question in your life if you want positive relationships. How might they be perceiving this? And it's not so that you can change everything to please everybody. It's so that you can start to develop the one thing our world needs a little bit more of, understanding. I ask people all the time, I'm like, hey, how'd you make that decision? What information did you have? How did you interpret it? What was your intention going into that? Okay, what action did you take and what did you hope from that action? Well, how do you see yourself in this relationship? All of that, I just told you from the top of my mind, is how unconscious it became. I just walked up that ladder, didn't I? Those types of questions make you a master in human relationships. That's our goal here. Let's take everything to the next level. Then, a third reminder of something else we also covered was fear. That fear stalls all progress in relationships and in persuasion. We talked about in the week of psychology, again, what are the three primary fears that people are dealing with? And I want to remind you that those fears were loss, they were hardship or powerlessness, and they were disappointment or failure. Those things we might call different words each time. So for example, in week 1 of psychology, I said hardship was really powerlessness. Like people might endure hardship, but if they feel like they're not going to have any power or influence in the relationship, they're scared of it. If they have no capability, no knowledge, no competency to deal with something, they're like, that's going to be too hard. I can't deal with that. I'd be overwhelmed, so they don't try. And disappointment or failure is really what we called outcome pain. If I try that, it might not work out, so I better not. So why do I reference all of that here, even though we already covered it? Because don't you think that might be something you need to take into account before you try to persuade anybody of anything? Right? How are they perceiving things and what might they fear is just as important as anything else. Because that's going to get this idea of, what did they experience? What do they want? How are they thinking of themselves? And ultimately, what might be getting in their way here? What concerns might be going on here? So I share all this because imagine if you brought this even to a sales process. Right? You want to become a high performance persuader, right? You want to be able to sell people on something. If you're not clear about your intention and the energy of that relationship, you don't know how your audience perceives things or draws conclusions through the perception ladder, and you don't know might be what is going to stick them, stop them, stall them from them acting or doing what you want, what your intention is for them, then good luck. No, it's just not going to happen. But as I talk to people, and I've spent a lot of time in every area of life of human relationship studying, I've been very blessed to work with some of the world's top negotiators in business, to some of the world's top negotiators literally in some of the scariest situations in the world, people who are hostage negotiators, to working with people who have made multiple millions of dollars in an hour on sales, to people who made $1 million on sales on a stage, to parents, and to people who are being literally in the process of divorce, who I've mediated. In that mediation process, in those negotiation processes, in those sales processes, the people who get ahead the best, who perform the best, they're thinking through these things consciously in advance of trying to get anybody to change. Then, before telling someone to change, they ask questions to elicit these types of things so they can understand with empathy and compassion the other person. But think about it. The last time you had a fight with your spouse, they brought up a big concern, it was bugging you, it was edging you. Did you take 10 seconds to stop and think, maybe this pain is coming from a fear. Maybe they're worried about something here. And they're really hooked on it. All this emotion is really coming from, they're just worried that they're going to lose respect with me, or they're going to lose respect with others. Maybe they're just worried that they're not going to be able to handle this, so they keep putting pressure on to get something done, and they keep bothering me. They're not worried that I'm incapable. They're just worried that it's not going to turn out well, that there may be all those worries or fears. And so I wanted to start this session on this footing of just sharing everything you've been learning about yourself in this course can now be used as a tool, as a strategy, as a weapon, as something positive to start shaping your other interactions. Everything about personal development that I love is that it allows us to go beyond ourselves and develop our relationships, right? The personal development's all amazing. All these weeks of training you've had could be just used for you to feel great about yourself, or you could start aiming them now and using them as tools or filters or lenses to see the world with to improve your relationships. And gosh, I'll help you do. I hope that you will do that, and I will continually help you do that by referencing this. You've got to be the role model now in all of your relationships. That's what makes that high performer. Why are they standing out a little bit more? They've set this intention to create something extraordinary, to create something excellent, to literally live out that definition of high performance, which is to outperform the standard measures over the long term, right? They want to go to that next level and always be growing, always be progressing and learning and gaining momentum. Even when it gets bad, their intention goes, okay, I want to get back in the game here and make this thing better, improve it. That constant sort of desire to grow, to build, to never stop improving. I know you've got that. Let's apply it to our relationships, and let's approach all of our relationships now, moving forward, with this lens. What's my intention? How can I bring positive energy here? How are they perceiving things? How am I perceiving things? What might I be fearing? What might they be fearing? If we can just get this base, boom, when we move into conflict, when we move into selling, when we move into trying to influence others, with that base, we can go to a whole other level. That's our job in High Performance Academy. So in this session, I hope you've taken a lot of notes, really thought about really where you are in your relationships, taken a baseline. How am I doing with my kids, my coworkers, my team, my family, my spouse? How am I really doing in those relationships? Take stock. Think about how often you're thinking about these things. And if you haven't been thinking about these things at all, boom, we just got the biggest breakthrough you'll have in your relationships. If you've already been there, next question, how do you now bring another level of intention and energy there to improve it even more, even when it's a struggle? All right, I hope you enjoyed this first session. In our next session, we're going to be talking about conflict. We're just going to go right for it. It's like, okay, because when you say persuasion, when you say influence, when you say people skills, people are like, okay, I got to fix things. So we'll get to the fixing, then we'll get to the selling. So in the next session, we'll be covering conflict. I hope you enjoyed this session. Take lots of notes. You can be a high performer. Let's get it. All right, high performers. Week 5, Session 2, High Performance Persuasion. We are talking about conflict. Oh yeah, let's get it. Now, I know a lot of people have a lot of emotion to this. Maybe you're in a conflict in your life and it is just sucking all the energy out of you, or maybe you've had that kind of conflict in the past and you can remember it, or maybe you've always been a person who looks at conflict as just a natural rite of passage. It just happens in every relationship constantly, consistently, a lot sometimes, and it doesn't really hook you. I don't know where you're at, but here's the thing I'm going to do. I'm going to approach it very positively. And I know some people don't like when I do that. They're like, Brendan, some people have very significant conflicts. I'm like, I'm not oblivious to it. I'm just so experienced with it, it doesn't scare me. That's all. I think conflicts can be very hard. We've all had struggles. Look, I had a conflict with the first woman that I ever loved. If you ever heard my story, I mean, it was so bad. We thought we were going to get married at some point, and then it ended up being in a very distrusting relationship. She cheated on me. I became suicidal. Then I had my car accident and turned my whole life around. I'm not stupid to conflict, and I've mediated dozens and dozens of very serious, difficult divorces, and I've been part of conflicts that literally cost millions and millions and millions of dollars in legal fees. I mean, I've been through the gamut of it, and I'm sure you have too. So again, I know I'm talking with my friends here, and I know that you've struggled with this as well. It's not that I don't take it seriously. It's that I think people take most things too seriously. I think that when conflicts happen, that it's very important that we take a step back as peaceful people who are conscious about our impact in the world, who are conscious about the understanding, who are approaching things the way that Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Mother Teresa would, to understand a way that the Dalai Lama would. At a spiritual level, that we've got to look at things from that spiritual higher level, that more accepting level in our lives. I think too many people are fighting and conflicting about the dumbest things imaginable that have very little meaning in the real world or the spiritual world, but at that moment their ego is hooked to it. Their narcissism is hooked to it. Their desperation is hooked to it. Their past disappointments and past hurts are hooked to it. And so they're hooking on all these things that really, it's not a thing. It's like when a couple and a spouse, they're fighting about the vacuuming. And it's just like, you didn't vacuum, I hate you, fight, and they're just screaming. You're like, oh my God, it's a vacuum. There's a little bit of dirt. Calm down. And forgive my language, but that's exactly what happens, isn't it? People start throwing labels. People start throwing a lot of emotion and freak out in places that frankly don't really need it. And it's because they're allowing their emotions to be pent up and stored up. They don't share enough. They're not communicating enough. They're getting at the end of their line, and you know how it is when you get the end of your line, the end of your rope, you kind of go crazy on people. And so I guess I'm framing all of this in a way to give an excuse to the reality that I'm going to be very positive about this. I think conflict is natural and inevitable. On a planet where there are 7 billion people now, at the time of this filming anyway, there's going to be misunderstanding. There's going to be multiple perspectives. And if you're always getting angry at other people for having a different perspective, for wanting different things in you, for fearing different things, for having different motivation, for taking different actions, your life's going to be really, really negative and long in a torturous manner. And I say that with nothing but respect because I know a lot of people have been there, but I also say it with a little bit of a plume because I think a lot of people need to stop bringing so much conflict into their lives, into situations, into their relationships based on their prior, their past, their disappointments, and frankly, with all due respect, their ego. I think it is a higher level of consciousness to be able to look at conflict and misunderstanding and not get so hooked to it. You know, maybe that comes from me. I had a lot of Buddhist training. I'm not a Buddhist, but I had a lot of Buddhist training when I was younger because I was very, very attracted to that concept of that a lot of suffering comes from attachment. And I remember reading that in Buddhism, and I thought, that's very true. You know, and I'm a person, I've read all the philosophies, all the major religions of the world. I've studied them closely, very carefully, trying to figure out, well, what do I feel? What do I believe? What do I relate with? Not just at that religious perspective, but at that perspective of just human truth and experience. And here's what I've discovered, that sometimes we get attached to things that, you know, really, they don't need to be. So I would like you to think about, as we're going through this, I'd like you to think about two things. What are things that just keep angering you and frustrating you about other people? And what recurring conflicts do you seem to have all the time? Or what conflict are you having right now? Because I think this is going to give you a framework for how to communicate through those. Because the answer to conflict is better communication. That's the answer. It really begins there. From everything we talked about in the previous session about, you know, intention and positivity, understanding other people's perspectives and fears, that's all going to help. But now let's walk through a conflict. Like, how could you deal with it better at that highest level? And I think this will help all of your relationships, is my hope for you. And it'll also give you the permission to step back once in a while and say, am I just freaking out about this stuff too much? Do I need to go revisit the psychology section and remind myself about what makes me happy? Remind myself what makes me hooked through the ladder of perception? Like, what is it that I'm bringing all this conflict? Because I will share this with you. I work on a lot of people's conflict in my life now, but I rarely have it. And I don't mean that to sound Pollyannish or braggadocious. The truth is I had a lot of it in my life when I was young. I grew up in very difficult circumstances. I grew up in places where, the way to solve a conflict was to punch people in the face. That's where I grew up, I grew up in an old Irish mining town that had been economically depressed for over a century. I saw a lot of conflict that was handled physically. I grew up in places where people had a lot of ego and they were fighting all the time. And at some point, I think we all have to just decide not to be part of that. Not to be part of that energy, not to bring it. And so I want you to think about how much conflict are you having in your life and why? Like, what are you getting so attached to and hooked to? And ultimately, is that really serving you? Is it really serving you? I don't have a lot of conflict, though I understand when it happens around me. And when people have it with me, I'm always patient and positive through the entire process. People can't believe it. They're like, you're the nicest person I've ever negotiated with. They say that all the time. And this is after I probably got almost everything I wanted. And people say all the time, like, wow, I didn't even know why I did that, but I wouldn't usually do that. And I usually don't even like that, but I did it because you asked. And it's only going to come from these types of perceptions and these types of actions that I take. So I just want to frame all this. If you got a big hook to conflict, let it go. This is the time in your adult life to say, you know what? I'm going to be that peaceful warrior. I'm going to fight for what I believe in. I'm going to try to persuade people to what I desire and what I feel of life. But I'm going to detach and not be so hooked and attached to my outcomes. And just start seeing your relationships as a nice dance. Sometimes you get your lead, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you end up exactly where you don't. Sometimes you're over here. But don't hate the process. Don't hate the people. Don't bring lots of negative energy into it. Because wherever there is hate and negative energy, nothing can grow. And once we can accept that, then we start to say, it's time that I develop myself in such a way that I can handle it. And I'll share this with you at a very practical level. I have people, and it's happened, people come up and will scream at me. They're mad at me about something that I had nothing to do with. And they're just like, and I'll literally be there. They're screaming. Sometimes at my events, something will happen at my event like, maybe they didn't get through the door as fast as they wanted to. Maybe they didn't get to sit where they wanted to sit. Maybe my team wouldn't let them do something until they handled an old refund issue. I don't know what it is, but sometimes I'll have a customer come up and scream at me for something I had nothing to do with. And you know what? It doesn't bother me. It doesn't faze me. I think, I wonder what their intention is right now. I wonder what they're interpreting, what happened, what their perception is. I wonder what they're worried or fearful about. And I'm just patient. And I know that maybe you've experienced this as a parent sometimes. You get a 2-year-old who's running up and they're screaming all over the place. You can scream it, you can match it, you can take their attention up to a level of 10, or you just go, this child is unsure of what they want, or this child really believes what they want. This child is in a bad place. I'm not going to be drawn into it. And I love seeing parents who can handle that situation with just grace and maturity and congruence and strength. I've always admired that, and I wanted to bring that in my own life. And I hope that you are hearing all this again. I'm trying to positively frame conflict for you. I'm practicing what I'm preaching here. I hope it's helping you. You can take your relationships next level, but to do that, you need to start approaching any misunderstanding, disagreement, or conflict from a peaceful, stable, conscious place that expects it, sees it, understands it, and is dedicated to working through it in a patient and positive manner. That's what I'll tell people. Conflict, before we say anything, we got to have patience and positivity. If we can have that going in, then we'll always come out better. Now, let's get to it. Let's pretend we're actually going to go through a conflict here. I'm going to give you some communication ideas. If you didn't know, my master's degree is in communication, organizational communication, and leadership studies. And my whole focus in my particular master's in our communications department was those two things, organizational communication, and my thesis was on leadership. So I was curious about how people, could lead through difficult conflicts. I was always curious about that. And not at just one-on-one level, but a bigger level. And then I've done a lot of mediation at the individual level. And what I've learned is if you can teach people how to talk through conflict, they just get better at it. It becomes a skill. So I'm hoping this will give you a framework for how to talk through conflicts in a way that will make you more capable, confident, and even better than you already are. Because I know, again, I'm preaching the choir. You wouldn't raise your hand to be a high performer if you didn't already have the intention to be amazing in your relationships. Sometimes we just need an extra tool, an extra idea. So here we go. First idea in conflict. Always frame the positive intention. Always. The first words out of your mind in a conflict, a negotiation, must always be framing with the positive intention. What does that mean? Let me use, I'll use some partner or spousal examples. You want your spouse to change, and they haven't changed. Here's what most people do. They run up to the spouse and like, I've asked you to do this 10,000 times, and you still haven't done it. That's the first thing out of their mouth is, I don't like this, I don't like you, damn you. That's what they're starting with. And they're wondering why the conflict always has these exclamation points behind them. Because they're going at the conversation from, I don't like you, I have these needs, you haven't met them, damn you. That's literally how it sounds. And if you're guilty of this, you're going to love this one. If you've ever been guilty of this, you already know this. The best thing to do is not to do that. So for example, instead, you would, if you want a behavioral change, you say, hey honey, do you have some time right now? Or you do, okay. Could I ask you a favor? Could we talk about something that I think we both really want and could help us both, but maybe I'm not sure, maybe you're not sure how we could get it. And I think maybe there's some frustrations here, but I feel like we both want to feel better. I feel like we both want to work through this, and I feel like we love each other. Maybe we've just been unsure. Do you have some time to talk? It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I do. Because it's framing it as positive. It's like, we want this together. Maybe we're both frustrated or struggling with this, but we want this thing to be better. Let's take some time to talk about it. It's just framing it with the positive. It's always, instead of, see, look, here's a relationship, you and them. And most people approach the relationships like this, and that's why they fight. They're like this all the time. But we're really like this in a relationship, right? And so here's what ends up happening in a relationship. If both people can start in the middle, that overlap, instead of starting from my perspective or their perspective, start in the we conversation. That's what this is, framing the positive tension. This is all about us. This is about us. This is about we being happier together. If we can start there, right? If us, we conversation about us being happier together, that's what a positive intention is. Hey, honey, I feel like we're so happy, and we're always trying to be happier together, and we work so hard, and we're trying to do so many things for each other, and sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't, sometimes I mess up, but you know, I feel like we always have this intention to make our relationship better. And I want to do that. Do you have a few minutes to talk? It's a different way. When you first do it, I promise it, even when I say it now, I'm aware that you say, well, that sounds clunky. Or you say, well, that won't work with my spouse. That won't work with my team. If you're saying that, you're lying to yourself, thinking that you know what works. I always tell this, and it's very important to hear. People in conflict don't know what works. That's why they're in conflict. Make sense? People in conflict don't know what works. That's why they're in conflict. So if you're ever like, well, that won't work for my spouse, you don't know what works for your spouse in that conflict yet. You need to hit that thing from 17 different angles, and if you just tried it once, it doesn't count. If you tried it 5 times, it doesn't count. You need to learn to adjust your tone, your pitch, your melody, your stance, your physicality, the positive framing of it. All these things need to shift until we can get that behavior change. I know you probably already know that, but don't give up. Don't give up. Try again anew. And if this feels clunky when you first try it, hey honey, I'd like to talk about something we both want. If it feels awkward, you'll find your phrasing. You'll get better at it. When I first started doing negotiations and people would be fighting with lawyers, it was so easy to jump in that negativity, and it felt so clunky to talk like this and frame it positive. And now it's just, I have a degree of facility with it. It's easy. You'll get better, okay? So please allow yourself to try things and get better. If it sucks the first time and they don't react to it, don't be like, well, that Brendan's positive framing shit don't work. No, it's like, be patient with yourself. Try several times. You will get better. You will develop the skill. I promise you, okay? All right. Second, we want you to describe the observable. Describe the observable. This is a very common thing to talk about in personal development and in communication studies. You're not going to start with, I feel, honey, I feel so terrible because you're always doing these things and I hate you. That's not where we're going. We're going to describe the observable. Honey, when this happened, and then describe what happened. And don't describe it from only your perspective. Remember, you've thought through their perspective. When I came home and I noticed that the floor was not vacuumed, and I saw the vacuum was sitting over there, and we had talked about this in the morning, that's just framing it like, here's what I saw. I saw this. I saw that. No feelings. It just, win this. You need to describe the observable. Same thing in a negotiation conflict. It's like, okay, here's where we've been so far. And it has to be described very matter-of-fact and very straight, right? Very straightforward. Here is what is observable. Here's what happened. We've been in this negotiation now as a negotiation person. When I go in, it's like, what I see and what we've been through so far, what we've all experienced, is 17 months debating these 4 points. The 4 points we've been debating are 1, 2, 3, 4. Does everyone agree with that? Okay, we do agree on that. Well, in that process, 17 months debating these 4 things, we've spent collectively over 100 hours discussing this. We've had teams of over 17 lawyers involved in this now, and it has grown into a true, ongoing conflict. It's a conversation. It feels like everyone is stuck here. And that you heard that transition now into this next one. Share the feeling. Share the feeling. We've been through this, or I saw that, this situation happened, here's the feeling. But notice it doesn't say share your feeling. It says share the feeling. If you need a better one, share the feelings. I didn't say Pete's mad at Henry, John's mad at Smith. Instead, I said, and what's happened now is we all feel like there's a roadblock. We all feel stuck. I'm sure we all sense throughout this process, sometimes things were going well, and sometimes we feel like we're just hitting the wall over and over and over again. You have to address the feelings. If it's an individual conflict, you say, I came home, I saw the floor was not vacuumed yet, and I felt kind of upset by it. I felt disappointed by it. I felt frustrated by it. I felt exhausted by it. Whatever your true feeling is, share it, but not with judgment. You are owning your stuff, not casting judgment. 2 very different things. One of the most important things in all relationships to discover. You have to learn to speak your truth without blaming anybody. It's a higher art, isn't it? You have to learn how to speak your truth without blaming anybody. Look, just because you felt mad doesn't mean they should feel bad. Just because you felt mad does not mean they should feel bad. You've got to allow to own yourself. It's like, yeah, I felt really hurt. You're not discounting it. You're not blaming it. You're describing your feeling, right? It's so essential. But it's also essential for then you to also share it. Like if you freaked out about the vacuum, then you say, you know what, honey, and I also realize you probably were wondering why I flipped my lid about the vacuum. I'm sure you felt like I was crazy. It's like ask them or say to them what you think they felt. It's very important. Never, ever, ever share your feelings about an observable situation without also saying a wild guess about how they felt. By contextualizing it, it makes them say, he understands me. Even if you get it wrong, they'll say, at least he's trying. At least she's thinking about me. And you might even couch it and say this, I don't know if you've been feeling this way, but I would guess you might feel like this. Is that right? Which is the transition into number 4. Request their perspective. Request their perspective. asking people, how did you see that? Is so incredibly powerful, and no one ever says that to me. I've been in so many conflicts in my life, and I've rarely, unless they were professionals, saw someone ask somebody directly, how did you see that? Yeah, what did you observe there? Based on what you observed, how did you interpret it? What did you think that meant? Oh, you thought it meant that. Oh, okay. Well, what intention did you have from there, and what did you want to do about it? Now you're eliciting their initiative. Oh, well, what did you think of yourself in that situation, or how did you feel in that situation? Eliciting some identity and emotion. Doing that is going to help us have an extraordinary understanding of it. And here's what I want you to point out. I am 4 layers into this framework, and we have asked for nothing. I want you to hear that. We've asked for nothing. What most people do is, would you vacuum the damn floor? It's like, that's what they say. They literally lead with the request. They say, do this, do that. And you can't do that in conflict. You cannot make your requests, ask for what you want, without these first. And that's why people keep tripping up. They're going to step number 4 without step number 1. It's trying to, imagine trying to dance with somebody and trying to finish that finale, right? It's just like, it doesn't work. You kind of have to take the steps together. And this is the steps together through conflict. You've got to frame it, describe the observable, share the feeling, request their perspective, and you have to lead the way doing that. And you have to, as you do that, not blame them, and always open up the conversation for them to do the same thing. Let them describe what they saw. Let them share their feelings. Let them ask about your perspectives. It's the patience and the positivity you do throughout this process that leads it to work. I mean, I've dealt with people who's like, this conflict, Brendan, will never end. I said, bring them in. So what do you mean? Bring them in, and we'll solve it in 10 minutes. They've been fighting about it for 5 years. And all that allowed it to happen was this framework with patience and positivity. Because think about what the opposite is. Just for a moment. The opposite of what is happening and fueling most conflicts in the world, and I would say this at both a domestic and international political level, is impatience and negativity. It's a neediness, an urgency that may or may not really exist, that is pushing on people instead of having diplomacy or dialogue and discussion with people. And if you keep pushing at people all the time, you will always have conflict. This is opening and inviting. And that's your job. Open and invite. Don't attack. And as soon as you learn to open and invite every discussion, just open it positively, invite conversation, that little amount of patience, some people, they do have a lot of conflict and anger. They just need to talk it out. Let them go, and in 20 minutes, they're like, I feel better. And you haven't solved anything. Men, listen, you don't need to solve. Ladies, clap. Okay. All you have to do is realize we're just opening and inviting. We did not go for the solution, did we? I want you to think about that. If you keep going for the solution too fast, you will always make them feel like you're going for the jugular, like you're blaming and you're taking versus opening, inviting, and giving. It's vital for you to measure that difference. 5th, make the ask with benefit extensions. Okay, now if you haven't studied the foundational training in this course, when we talked about influence, the video on influence, the session we did on influence, I taught about this idea of benefit extension. It means instead of just saying one benefit for you or why you want something or one benefit for them, you extend the benefit conversation around so it's good for you, it's good for them, it's good for the relationship, it's good for the community and the world, right? You're sharing how this is going to benefit things. It's like, honey, if we do this, I feel like I would feel this way. You'd probably start thinking and feeling that way. And, we would feel amazing together. And what I think is important and why we do that is because I also feel like Johnny would see us in this better space together, and ultimately our family would be happier together. So now it wasn't just about me, it wasn't just about them, it wasn't just about Johnny, it was about all of us. It was the bigger we story, who are happy together. I hope that resonates with you, because a lot of people just goes, I want this, period. It's no, I want this because of these benefits. Every request must have benefit extension to it. It's a true art in negotiation. It's a true art in all conflict. It's helping people understand, it's like, oh, this would be good not just for me, but for other people too. That's benefit extension. Think about when we get to sales in the next session, how vital benefit extension is. It's not just for them. If they could see it's good for me, my family, my community, the world, they're more likely to see it as a good product, a good brand, a good service, a good deal. So think about that. What is your request? What do you want to change? What's your ask? What do you want them to do? Okay, you want them to, we want them to vacuum. Okay, you can't just say, I want you to vacuum. It's like you need to broaden that benefit and conversation. It can't just be about the dirt on the floor. Now, it's not just about the vacuum. It's about us understanding how we can help each other at the house better. It's about us knowing that we both want our lives to be a little bit more simpler. We want our lives to be a little more clean and clear. We want to support each other. We want to have a happier home, a cleaner home. And so how can we do that together so that you're happy with what you have to do at home and I have to do at home, and that we're happy with the area that we live in? Because I know we both feel like the world is too chaotic. It's broadening the conversation so that you don't look like a tiny child asking for the piece of candy. Does that make sense? It's very important. Most people in conflict look like a 2-year-old screaming for the lollipop. It really is that bad. And I know you've been part of that and been guilty of that as you were younger, but it cannot exist anymore. And I know I've already gotten through this, so now the next level is, great, can you get more artful in describing the benefits of how it will help you, them, the relationship, the community, the team, the world, whatever it is, okay? That is the highest art right here. All of this is setting us up to win. This done well is knocking it out of the park. That's the home run, right? If you learn to ask, but surround it with benefits for you, them, the broader relationship or company or world or impact, whatever it is, that's where you go to the next level of high performance in dealing with conflict and difficulty. Then I just want to share one last thing. I don't know if it's really a tactic or a tip, but I do know it is the most important thing in the world to leadership. And if you didn't know, my first book was actually a book called The Student Leadership Guide, now been used literally millions of times around the world to teach kids about leadership. And it had a very positive frame in it. But one of the things I found when I did my thesis on leadership, and now I've worked with Fortune 50 companies so many times, big idea here, big idea. The number one rule in leadership, I would say it's the number one rule in conflict, the number one rule in everything that we do in human relationships when we want it to go well with somebody else. And it's just this acronym, PSWTC, and it's this idea, the number one rule in leadership. People support what they create. People support what they create. PSWTC. People support what they create. What's that mean? It means if you want someone to do something, let them be part of figuring out the answer for it. If you have a big vision for the company, you can go into the company and tell everyone, I want us to do this. Here's our charge. Here we go. And everyone in the company goes, great, another person telling us what to do. Screw you, I'm out. But if you go in and you have conversations with people and everyone feels like they've defined that vision, that they've been part of the process, then when you come to the conclusion about what to do, everyone goes, oh yeah, I recognize my fingerprints on that. I'm in. I'm all in because I was involved. Got it? If you're going to solve a problem with your spouse, your partner, your community, your team, and in high-level government negotiations, we have to teach the same exact thing. People support what they create. Whatever your ask was with all of this, guess what? They have asks too. They have requests too. And so when they do, you have to make a solution that's not just yours, it's ours. And as soon as it goes from yours to ours, now everyone's got skin in the game, And everybody champions what they created. They do. Everyone commits easier to things that they came up with than what they were told to do. And I know you've done that at work. Look, we've all had a pet project at work that we came up with. We were so excited because we created it versus something the boss threw on the desk that we were like, that sucks. You know? Well, the same thing happens at home. The same thing happens across the negotiation table. The same thing happens in hostage negotiation. The greatest hostage negotiators in the world, what they're really doing is getting the person who's taken the hostages, the terrorist, if you will, come up with some ideas that will serve them, but also serves the situation. The benefit goes beyond just the terrorist, and it goes into the conversation about how do we resolve this? And they're constantly letting that person come up with ideas, and it sounds like we're in this together to figure it out, even though it's a very scary, high-stakes conflict. People support what they create. And just so you know how that gets resolved, in high-level negotiations like that, where lives are on the line, what ultimately ends up happening is that the negotiator will have the terrorist or the person, the kidnapper, whatever, they will have that person create a solution that ultimately they commit to, that's what catches them. That's the thing that the negotiator and the team will use to turn it on its head against them. You know, if that person says, you know, I want a bulletproof, you know, truck to go do this and do this and do this. Okay, great. Where do you want it to go? What's the route? And then they'll use that information against the person, even though they came up with the answer, right? So that's how that gets resolved. Don't do that at home. I'm just sharing with you. That's kind of how that gets resolved. Since I opened up that loop, I had to close it. But that's ultimately what happens. People support what they create. Your job is to help generate options in a relationship or in a conflict that the both of you feel benefits as much to extent possible the us story. If you can just try this, I know this feels difficult, but I've had clients who, when I'll sit down, I'll do this with them, and I'll literally I'm like, write this out on a card. Write it on a card. And if you've been really struggling with a spouse, if you're in a conflict right now and you just can't end it yourself, write all this out, sit down with your partner, write this out on a card, say, look, I've just been learning about how to deal with conflict better. It's been a real struggle for us, but I know we love each other, and I know we want our relationship and our life to have that energy and that love back like it used to, but we even want more of it. Like, we love each other, and we both know that we could do something better, but sometimes we get stuck. I get stuck, and sometimes, you know, it doesn't feel so good. We're just not relating the way that we want to, but I know that we both believe it can. So I'm going to bumble through this. Is it okay? I'm going to try this little thing here. If you want to see it, I'll show it to you, but can I try saying some things to you? I know it's going to sound weird, but I just want to try something new. Is that okay? And just try. I'm not pretending that it will be easy. I'm not pretending they'll accept it. Some of you might need to show this video to your spouse, to your partner, so they can see that, you know what, this relationship is going to be solved, this conflict is going to be solved in a way in which the only way is if you both intend to bring more patience, more positivity, and more people support what they create to this conversation. And if the both of you will do that more often together, we'll move through this. So I hope this supports you. I got nothing but goodwill, support, good energy and mojo going your way in conflicts. I know they struggle. I know they suck. I know sometimes you get awful and you feel terrible about what you did, and sometimes the other person does too. So hopefully this will give you a new way to work through that so you can minimize those emotions and feelings. And I know too, for some of you who are watching, like, I've never seen Brendan intense like this or use language like that. I'm doing it for a reason because it's just real about what conflict is. Conflicts can suck, but once you get good at them, and once you understand how they work, and once you just say, I'm going to bring patience to this process. I'm going to bring positivity to this process. I'm going to bring this openness and this invitation into the process because I'm going to allow myself to let go of the 2-year-old candy cane screaming baby for a moment. Open myself up to learning about this person's perspective and their fears and their needs, and then invite them into a conversation to how we can do better together and really feel like I'm going to play my part and give of myself into this. then I can trust things will get better because at least that had intention and goodwill versus negativity and push. I hope that serves you. I hope you love this session, and I challenge you to try this out. As clunky as it will, try it out over and over and over and over again till you get capability at it. You can become a high performer at solving the conflicts of your life, and I really deeply believe you don't need to do that just for you. You got to do that for your kids, for your family, for your relationship, for the overall world. If we had everybody in this world performing better in conflict, we would have more peace, more vitality, and more ability to grow the momentum of the human species. How's that for benefit extension? We'll see you in session number 3, where we talk about sales, the ultimate persuasion. If you have an idea to sell, a product to sell, a brand to sell, anything to sell, including just your feelings and your beliefs, we're going to get there in the next session. You can be a high performer. You must believe it even through the darkest of times. Bring patience and positivity. I'll see you in the next video. Hey, high performers, it's Brendan. Let's rock and roll. Session number 3 on high performance persuasion. Now, this session is about something I'm asked about all of the time in my life, which is about selling, about how do you persuade people to believe in an idea or to buy a product or a program. And obviously, most of my life is really centered around this type of thing. This is ultimately about why people buy our courses, buy my books, buy my videos, watch my videos, do everything else in my own business. But it's also about the same thing I'm asked from Fortune 500 companies to major global superstars who are like, how do I sell my stuff better? And this is ultimately my favorite framework to give. And it's the same proven framework that I have used personally in over $14 million online promotions in a row. It always comes back down to this. This is sort of copywriting, sales 101, but the art of doing it, the little distinctions I'll share with you, I think will really help you. So whether you're trying to sell an idea to your spouse, hey honey, let's move to Detroit, right? Or tough sell. Or you are trying to convince somebody to buy your product or program. This is going to give you the outline and some communication skill, I hope, that will help take it to that entire next level. This is a big one, so let's just jump right into it. I'm going to assume that you're going to think right now of what is something you want to sell. An idea, a product, or service. Whatever it is, I would like you to kind of just hone in on that as we go through. Then this will be a video that you'll probably come back to over and over and over and over again with its worksheet. To every time you go to sell something, always fill this out or watch this video. Trust me, it will make the difference. I personally go through this framework anytime I'm going to sell anything just to get my mind back in the groove. Now, like all things, there's art. You might change the order of this somewhere along the way if you want to, but frankly, I kind of just stick to this. And I'll share with you why, and you'll see its effectiveness as we go. So let's pretend you got something to sell. Your idea, your product, your service, your brand, your concept, your politics, your religion, your faith. You're trying to sell something. Whatever it is, let's just go through here. The first thing that you have to do in your sales process is you must frame the possibility and then the problem as you begin that video, that presentation, that pitch, that discussion. Has to begin with you saying, you know what? Here's what's possible. And, if we could have this, or have you ever wanted that? That's a great conversation to begin. It's like, if you've ever been through my Experts Academy program where we teach people to have a career like mine, writing books or doing blogs or YouTube shows, podcasts, selling content online in any way or shape or form, I'll often say, have you ever had an important message that you wanted to share with the world? You had a product or a program or service and you just wanted to blow that up online and get lots of people talking about it so you could get traffic to your cause or your sales page. Or, you just wanted the world to know about something, but you didn't know how to spread that idea. Worse, maybe you didn't know how to get paid for it. I just did something there. I combined the possibility, share your message, reach people with it, maybe monetize it. The problem, you didn't know how. It was all in the framing of the conversation. Right? That's your think of if frame is a different word for you, you're introducing, you're kind of painting the dream, then what gets in the way of the dream. Painting the dream, what gets in the way of the dream. That's the way you're framing the sales conversation. Now, this might be different if you're a really old school marketer or you were trained by old school marketers who always said, start with the headline that's the problem. Start the conversation with the problem. Have you ever been frustrated this? Have you ever hated that? Have you ever been challenged in such a way you wanted to kill people? And here's all I have to say about that is I know a lot of marketers who believe that or copywriters who were taught that. And the challenge is they were never taught to build a brand. They were taught to get a quick sale, but they never thought about the brand. Look, when you bought your iPhone, if you bought an iPhone, you didn't buy it because it solved a particular problem. You bought it because it painted a different lifestyle, different potential. Even though it solved the problem of cell phones sucked, it started with, we should be able to communicate better. We should be able to have a device that stores information, allows us to access information and talk to people and learn things and literally have it as a hub of our life versus these stupid things over here that don't work half the time with their ugly buttons, right? You think about Steve Jobs' presentations, they were always aspirational. That's why the Apple brand built so large. It was aspirational. You need to start with the aspiration, the dream, the possibility before you jump into the problem. Problems are great for the rubberneck effect, to go, oh wow, look, problem. But they don't build brands over the long term. They need to be there as part of any sales process. You need to be very clear. What's the problem your consumer or your listener is going through? What are they frustrated about? But first, the bigger question is, what do they want? What's the bigger dream, vision, perspective, idea for them that could change their life or improve their life or advance their life? Know what they want or what they should aspire to before you seek to address the problem. Does that help? It's just a different way of thinking about the beginning of a video or a sales process. Too many people go right for the jugular of the problem, and it can capture attention, but it also loses the audience over the long term. Because remember, you're never going to just sell one idea or one product or one program. They're going to see you selling your ideas over and over and over again. If it's always like, the world is doomed, things suck, don't you hate it, aren't you insufficient? At some point, it's just like, it's like the reason people stop watching Fox News. Is that political? I don't think that's Travis says that's okay. So it's like, hey, I hope you don't watch Fox News. Nothing against, no political statement there at all. I just think there's more positive, less extremist conversations to be had in the world. Isn't that a possible thing? Second, tell the solution story. The solution story is everything in all sales. And people forget it all the time. What's the solution story? After you've talked about what's possible, but you struggle with these things, then you go into the solution story. Say, yeah, me too. I knew more things were possible, but I was struggling. I had all these challenges, so I went out and I went on a search because I felt there must be a better way. There must be a better way is critical to everything. It's critical to every great sale you have ever seen was this hook of, there's got to be a better way. I was believing something was amazing. I was struggling with this, and I thought, there's got to be a better way to achieve that. There's got to be even think about the way that we talked about high performance when I talked about this program. I said, look, we all know there's a next level. The challenge is sometimes we don't know what to do. We get frustrated. We get in a routine. We have fears or thoughts that are holding us back. We're unsure of how our mind works or what we can do to optimize our energy, to break through our barriers, to be more productive. We just don't know what to do. And so we struggle year after year with this story when we know we should be at that story. I knew there must be a better way too, because in my life I had that same challenges. I had these same problems. And if you've ever been with us at Experts Academy, we call this the expert story positioning part of the conversation, where we say, I was in the same boat as you. I was struggling. I thought, there's got to be a better way. So it sent me on a search to figure out, there's got to be a better way to handle this. There's got to be a better way to solve this problem or achieve that goal. That's the search. Then, as you describe that search, you talk about it was hard. I tried a bunch of things. It didn't work. Some things did, but it wasn't quite the total solution. And then I had the breakthrough, the aha. And I realized if I did this, or we combine these elements, that would be the perfect solution. And it was like, oh my gosh, breakthrough. Then from there, we started applying the aha. We started using the solution, and we started winning, getting results. Here's what happened. Here's the story. This is the rags to riches, if you will, part of a sales process. It's the story that says, things weren't good, I was frustrated. I knew it could be better. So I went on this journey to learn, to apply, to try, to experiment, to combine, to innovate. Then I figured out this one thing, or these two little simple things, that changed everything, and it helped me find the solution, the breakthrough, and then I started applying that solution breakthrough, and everything got better. That is how you begin the selling process, right? That's how everything is framed in a way. It's possible, it's positive, and look, this person, they did their homework and they tried it. It's building credibility, isn't it? It's like, oh, they're just like me. That's relatability and rapport. But it's also credible. You did the homework to figure it out. It's also interesting. It's got a hook of, ooh, they figured something out that's different. Amazing. Then they got results. The results make me think, maybe I can do that. Maybe I can have that. Maybe that works better than what I'm doing. I might need that. And it introduces the need, all in 2 simple steps. If we can get this right, almost everything else takes care of itself. It's almost just like these are just mental levers and check boxes we now need to click if we did a good job here. It's very important. Spend time thinking about these 2 things. Okay, third, now you bust the myths. What do we mean by that? You bust the myths. It's like after you tell them you won, you got the results, then you stop and say, but you know what? I'll tell you, learning that process and having all the success, I learned that things aren't as they used to be. That, in the old world, people believed these things. But what I've learned after this aha moment, these results, the truth is these things. It's called the juxtaposition of truth. It's where you say, everyone thought, hey, high performers, it's Brendan. Let's rock and roll. Session number 3 on high performance persuasion. Now, this session is about something I'm asked about all of the time in my life, which is about selling, about how do you persuade people to believe in an idea or to buy a product or a program. And obviously, most of my life is really centered around this type of thing. This is ultimately about why people buy our courses, buy my books, buy my videos, watch my videos, do everything else in my own business. But it's also about the same thing I'm asked from Fortune 500 companies to major global superstars who are like, how do I sell my stuff better? And this is ultimately my favorite framework to give. And it's the same proven framework that I have used personally in over $14 million online promotions in a row. It always comes back down to this. This is sort of copywriting, sales 101, but the art of doing it, the little distinctions I'll share with you, I think will really help you. So whether you're trying to sell an idea to your spouse, hey honey, let's move to Detroit, right? Or tough sell. Or you are trying to convince somebody to buy your product or program. This is going to give you the outline and some communication skill, I hope, that will help take it to that entire next level. This is a big one, so let's just jump right into it. I'm going to assume that you're going to think right now of what is something you want to sell. An idea, a product, or service. Whatever it is, I would like you to kind of just hone in on that as we go through. Then this will be a video that you'll probably come back to over and over and over and over again with its worksheet. To every time you go to sell something, always fill this out or watch this video. Trust me, it will make the difference. I personally go through this framework anytime I'm going to sell anything just to get my mind back in the groove. Now, like all things, there's art. You might change the order of this somewhere along the way if you want to, but frankly, I kind of just stick to this. And I'll share with you why, and you'll see its effectiveness as we go. So let's pretend you got something to sell. Your idea, your product, your service, your brand, your concept, your politics, your religion, your faith. You're trying to sell something. Whatever it is, let's just go through here. The first thing that you have to do in your sales process is you must frame the possibility and then the problem as you begin that video, that presentation, that pitch, that discussion. has to begin with you saying, you know what? Here's what's possible. And, if we could have this, or have you ever wanted that? That's a great conversation to begin. It's like, if you've ever been through my Experts Academy program where we teach people to have a career like mine, writing books or doing blogs or YouTube shows, podcasts, selling content online in any way or shape or form, I'll often say, have you ever had an important message that you wanted to share with the world? You had a product or a program or service and you just wanted to blow that up online and get lots of people talking about it so you could get traffic to your cause or your sales page. Or, you just wanted the world to know about something, but you didn't know how to spread that idea. Worse, maybe you didn't know how to get paid for it. I just did something there. I combined the possibility, share your message, reach people with it, maybe monetize it. The problem, you didn't know how. It was all in the framing of the conversation, right? That's your, think of if frame is a different word for you, you're kind of painting the dream, then what gets in the way of the dream. Painting the dream, what gets in the way of the dream. That's the way you're framing the sales conversation. Now, this might be different if you're a really old school marketer or you were trained by old school marketers who always said, start with the headline that's the problem. Start the conversation with the problem. Have you ever been frustrated this? Have you ever hated that? Have you ever been challenged in such a way you wanted to kill people? And here's all I have to say about that is I know a lot of marketers who believe that or copywriters who were taught that. And the challenge is they were never taught to build a brand. They were taught to get a quick sale, but they never thought about the brand. Look, when you bought your iPhone, if you bought an iPhone, you didn't buy it because it solved a particular problem. You bought it because it painted a different lifestyle, different potential. Even though it solved the problem of cell phones sucked, it started with, we should be able to communicate better. We should be able to have a device that stores information, allows us to access information and talk to people and learn things and literally have it as a hub of our life versus these stupid things over here that don't work half the time with their ugly buttons, right? You think about Steve Jobs' presentations, they were always aspirational. That's why the Apple brand built so large. It was aspirational. You need to start with the aspiration, the dream, the possibility before you jump into the problem. Problems are great for the rubberneck effect, to go, oh wow, look, problem. But they don't build brands over the long term. They need to be there as part of any sales process. You need to be very clear. What's the problem your consumer or your listener is going through? What are they frustrated about? But first, the bigger question is, what do they want? What's the bigger dream, vision, perspective, idea for them that could change their life or improve their life or advance their life? Know what they want or what they should aspire to before you seek to address the problem. Does that help? It's just a different way of thinking about the beginning of a video or a sales process. Too many people go right for the jugular of the problem. Hey, high performers, it's Brendan. Let's rock and roll. Session number 3 on high performance persuasion. Now, this session is about something I'm asked about all of the time in my life, which is about selling, about how do you persuade people to believe in an idea or to buy a product or a program. And obviously, most of my life is really centered around this type of thing. This is ultimately about why people buy our courses, buy my books, buy my videos, watch my videos, do everything else in my own business. But it's also about the same thing I'm asked from Fortune 500 companies to major global superstars who are like, how do I sell my stuff better? And this is ultimately my favorite framework to give. And it's the same proven framework that I have used personally in over $14 million online promotions in a row. It always comes back down to this. This is sort of copywriting, sales 101, but the art of doing it, the little distinctions I'll share with you, I think will really help you. So whether you're trying to sell an idea to your spouse, hey honey, let's move to Detroit, right? Or tough sell. Or you are trying to convince somebody to buy your product or program. This is going to give you the outline and some communication skill, I hope, that will help take it to that entire next level. This is a big one, so let's just jump right into it. I'm going to assume that you're going to think right now of what is something you want to sell. An idea, a product, or service. whatever it is, I would like you to kind of just hone in on that as we go through. Then this will be a video that you'll probably come back to over and over and over and over again with its worksheet to every time you go to sell something, always fill this out or watch this video. Trust me, it will make the difference. I personally go through this framework anytime I'm going to sell anything just to get my mind back in the groove. Now, like all things, there's art. You might change the order of this somewhere along the way if you want to, but frankly, I kind of just stick to this. And I'll share with you why, and you'll see its effectiveness as we go. So let's pretend you got something to sell. Your idea, your product, your service, your brand, your concept, your politics, your religion, your faith. You're trying to sell something. Whatever it is, let's just go through here. The first thing that you have to do in your sales process is you must frame the possibility and then the problem as you begin that video, that presentation, that pitch, that discussion. Has to begin with you saying, you know what? Here's what's possible. And, if we could have this, or have you ever wanted that? That's a great conversation to begin. It's like, if you've ever been through my Experts Academy program where we teach people to have a career like mine, writing books or doing blogs or YouTube shows, podcasts, selling content online in any way or shape or form, I'll often say, have you ever had an important message that you wanted to share with the world? You had a product or a program or service and you just wanted to blow that up online and get lots of people talking about it so you could get traffic to your cause or your sales page. Or, you just wanted the world to know about something, but you didn't know how to spread that idea. Worse, maybe you didn't know how to get paid for it. I just did something there. I combined the possibility, share your message, reach people with it, maybe monetize it. The problem, you didn't know how. It was all in the framing of the conversation, right? That's your, think of if frame is a different word for you, you're introducing, you're kind of painting the dream, then what gets in the way of the dream. Painting the dream, what gets in the way of the dream. That's the way you're framing the sales conversation. Now, this might be different if you're a really old school marketer or you were trained by old school marketers who always said, start with the headline that's the problem. Start the conversation with the problem. Have you ever been frustrated this? Have you ever hated that? Have you ever been challenged in such a way you wanted to kill people? And here's all I have to say about that is I know a lot of marketers who believe that or copywriters who were taught that. And the challenge is they were never taught to build a brand. They were taught to get a quick sale, but they never thought about the brand. Look, when you bought your iPhone, if you bought an iPhone, you didn't buy it because it solved a particular problem. You bought it because it painted a different lifestyle, different potential. Even though it solved the problem of cell phones sucked, it started with, we should be able to communicate better. We should be able to have a device that stores information, allows us to access information and talk to people and learn things and literally have it as a hub of our life versus these stupid things over here that don't work half the time with their ugly buttons, right? You think about Steve Jobs' presentations, they were always aspirational. That's why the Apple brand built so large. It was aspirational. You need to start with the aspiration, the dream, the possibility before you jump into the problem. Problems are great for the rubberneck effect, to go, oh wow, look, problem. But they don't build brands over the long term. They need to be there as part of any sales process. You need to be very clear. What's the problem your consumer or your listener is going through? What are they frustrated about? But first, the bigger question is, what do they want? What's the bigger dream, vision, perspective, idea for them that could change their life or improve their life or advance their life? Know what they want or what they should aspire to before you seek to address the problem. Does that help? It's just a different way of thinking about the beginning of a video or a sales process.